loud?
Yes.
Okay.
I think you should stand when you're speaking, please.
Oh, come on.
Thank you.
There's plenty of empty seats in the
I don't
front.
have a podium. This is kind of odd, but okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Lynn Mercier, and I am the chairperson of the current West Street Building Committee. I'm going to first give you some background on how this project came about, and then how our committee came up with the recommendation to renovate the building for town offices and for the COA. So how did this project start up? Back in August of 2022, a group of concerned citizens met with the select board, asking them to revisit and to move forward with the potential uses of the existing West Street School building. We were proposing at that point to the select board to either consider fulfilling the recommendation that was made in 2018 to build 2 new buildings, one for town offices and one for the Council of Aging, or if not, then to consider another recommendation, which would be to renovate the West Street School for the offices and the COA. The potential future for the building was last studied in 2018, at which time the recommendation, as I said, to the select board was to raise the existing structure and to build 2 new town buildings in phases. Phase 1 would be a building for town offices, and phase 2 would be a building for the Council on Aging. The select board at that time unanimously accepted the recommendation of the committee. However, the town took no action at that point, and the building stayed vacant. So from that point on, the approximately 44,000 square foot West Street building was maintained by the town and insured yearly at approximately $23,000 per year. However, leaving the building vacant is an issue, and it invites additional maintenance issues as well as vandalism, in addition to creating an attractive nuisance, which could result in potential liability for the town. So in response, the select board in January of 23 created a new West Street Building Committee. The current members of the committee are sitting up front. We have Chris Martin, Gail Clark, Chief O'Grady, Jennifer Silva, me, Lynn Mercier, Micheline Turgeon, Jim Tromke, and missing tonight is Steve Shonaki, who's also on our committee. The bottom line for the new committee was to develop options regarding the building and cost estimates for each option. However, we did not have the benefit of an appropriation to get definitive numbers or complete a study. Additionally, the select board asked the committee to determine square footage needs for office space, to review the 2018 West Street Reuse Building Committee's report, and then to review the original blueprints of the school for its current condition, as well as tour the school. So regarding space requirements, we contacted each of the town departments and the COA. They all responded, and the proposed space requirements that were needed came up to be a little over 16,000 square feet. That included storage needs. Our committee then looked at the same options that the 2018 committee looked at, which was building new, abating and demolition of the building, as well as renovation. So we took each one of those options and brought it up to today's standards. So for building new, what we found out. We first asked the architect from the 2018 study to give us updated prices to build new, to build the buildings that were proposed in 2018. So again, that was to raise the existing building and then to build 2 buildings in its place that totaled approximately 11,000 square feet. So each building would be a little over 5,100 square feet. At the time, those buildings were sized to be particularly under the code requirements for installation of a sprinkler system. So So according to the report, the original report, the cost for those two new buildings was a little more than 3.4 million in 2018. The same architect that we contacted told us to increase that amount by at least 65% for today's cost. But that 65% would be exclusive of the soft costs such as designing, engineering, printing and advertising, and construction, testing, etc. So in order to include those soft costs, the committee felt it was safe to add another 10% and to up the price by 70%. So if we were to build the exact two buildings that were being offered in 2018, the cost would be approximately 7.6 million. However, we did know that the buildings that were designed would have to be changed because our current fire chief is requiring us to install a fire suppression system in the buildings no matter what the size. So we already know that that cost would be even higher. So then we looked at raising and abating West Street. To determine that cost, we contacted two vendors. We asked them for current costs. The estimated costs from both those vendors came out to be at a minimum $1 million. $750,000 to remove asbestos, and then $550,000 for demolition. However, those costs did not include the costs associated with universal waste, hazardous waste, backfill, underground oil tank problems, temporary fencing, etc. So again, we had to up that price to include those other costs. So for an approximate estimate for raising and abating, it would be approximately, minimally, $2 million. So then we looked at renovation. As our committee pursued the idea of renovating, it became clear that a complete renovation, in other words, tearing the building down to the studs, would not be required. As the structure of the building was sound, the roof was relatively new, and the existing 44,000 square feet of space would be more than adequate for the town's needs. So there is currently plenty of space for all the town offices and storage, a senior center, and additional office spaces as needed. For example, there's room for a conservation agent, room for a veterans services officer, a town accountant, and a town planner. Additionally, the space as it exists is capable of conducting town meetings, town elections, and has the potential for a community and a recreational center in the future. So first we contacted the Mass Department of Health, who walked through the building, testing the air quality and looking for other environmental concerns. And what the Department of Health told us is that there was no evidence of mold throughout the building, and the building was structurally sound. However, there were some issues related to moisture in the building, but that could be alleviated by removing the landscaping by the building, as well as updating the HVAC system and adapting that system for the expected new occupancy and storage of the town materials. So then the committee went ahead and contacted several firms and individuals for estimates for the soft renovation. And those estimates are what you see in the flyer that I think you all have a copy of. That'll give you the estimate of the fire suppression system, the windows and doors, which would be a complete replacement, the HVAC system, the removal of asbestos, the PCP removals, and then we threw in a miscellaneous amount of money in there, which would take care of the costs that we don't know at this point. In other words, costs that we don't have a hard quote for. And then the water system. And on top of that, we have to add in OPM fees, designer and engineering fees, and then contingency. So with all those estimates, the committee determined that the building can be renovated for approximately $5.7 million. So with that in mind, the town administrator and the finance committee suggested that the town fund well, after we met with the select board, and the select board agreed to the renovation, the town administrator and the finance committee went through the numbers and suggested the town fund the renovation with available dollars from several funds. There's going to be no property tax override required, and taxes will not increase due to this project. So what are the funds? Where is the money, the 5.7 million coming from? Again, that's in your flyer, but we have ARPA funds, which are funds from the federal government that were given to us through COVID. We have unspent prior general fund articles, which is money that is left over for the most part in articles that we have done and didn't have to spend all the money that was outlaid for that. And then we have unspent prior capital project articles. So in closing, it's our opinion, the committee's opinion, that the project that will be presented to the town at town meeting will bring us a building that is completely free of hazardous materials, capable of housing all existing offices and record storage for the town in one location, capable of housing additional office space as needed for the town, and capable for conducting town elections and town meetings. Also, eventually, the building could also become a community center for the location of a teen center, a recreation center for the town, a location where organizations can meet, and also a location for community-wide events. So that is the information that we have for you. Are there questions? Okay, go ahead, you can stand up.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, do you ever think about selling the building to a private company and having them renovate it and then collect taxes on the building from a private company?
So Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the 2018 committee paid for appraisal of the property, and it came out that the building was not worth selling. In fact, the building was worth $100,000 in its current state. So it wasn't worth selling. Yes?
The unspent prior capital projects, what does that consist of? What projects have not been the funds used for?
Okay, Dennis? Okay. There's a few articles. Back in July of 2020, we voted for the new mower for Jeremy. Okay, that was originally $115,000. We got $424 left in that account. Okay, so I'm reprogramming the leftover funds to this project. Okay. The next item, again on July of 2020, we voted for the transit vehicle that's used by our maintenance department. That original article was $52,000, and there's $3,600 left in that account. Back in 2007, on May of 2007, we voted for the West Street School roof replacement. That original article was $1,135,230. There's $11,000 left in that account. The next was on June of 2011, we voted for the East Meadow roof replacement. That was a $500,000 appropriation, of which $76,000 is left. Then we had in September of 2013, the West Street School feasibility study. We voted $800,000 for that. There's $157,000 left in that account. In June of 2013, we had voted an appropriation to remove the in-ground oil tank at the West Street School. That was $120,000 that was appropriated. There's $113,000 left at this point in time. And then we have from February of 2016, the renovation addition to the East Meadow Elementary School. That has two pieces left in it. The first part was there was $2 million appropriated from our stabilization funds to fund the project. There's another $1 million left in there from our debt exclusion vote. We can't spend the leftover debt exclusion money only for specific purposes, per DOR. Okay, so we're only using the 2 million that came from the stabilization. Those total the 2,361,000. All set?
I just want to clarify, because I'm concerned with monies that were allocated for the potential renovation of the gymnasium lockers and stuff. None of that funds are being used, those funds are still intact.
No, that's under the general fund article, the high school gym and locker room. Okay? The reason we're using those funds is we have the appropriation to renovate the cafeteria at the high school, $1,050,000. If the school is proceeding, they have an RFP out there that they will be opening bids on Monday, December 4th, to award the engineering contract and get that project moving. The problem that we're running into is there's a trigger of 30% of the assessed value of the building. Once you hit that, you have to bring it up to current ADA code, okay? If we go to spend this money, the building inspector, building commissioner, will be required to have that building be current ADA compliant. So the 1.3 million will be okay to do the gym and the high school, but we won't have the funds available for the bringing it up to accessibility codes. Okay? What would have to happen is we do the kitchen. We would have to wait 3 years before we could entertain this project. Minimum 3 years. That, at the rate of inflation that we're seeing now, again, the 1.3 million will not be sufficient in 3 years. We're saying bring it back when we can address it, and address it at that point in time. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Rich?
Okay, I just want everyone to understand what we just said. All of the money coming from these accounts is money that can be used for whatever purpose we determine, whether it's to reduce taxes in following years or other projects. So it's a little bit misleading when they say that our taxes won't go up. Technically, they're correct, they won't go up, but they won't go down either. We could use this money to reduce taxes if we wanted to, so it's not coming out of thin air. So, I mean, I'm in favor of this project, but I think it's fair that everyone understands where this money is coming from and what it can be used for.
Go ahead.
Just an observation. Attending the year-end, the town meetings annually, right? The finance committee, which I think is the biggest asset we have in this town, among other things, right? John would get up and talk to the people at the meeting and say, you know, Granby has a problem. Granby's a small town with a big city spending mentality, right? And then he went on and said, for the last 8 years, we're losing $375,000 a year in the stabilization funds, right? Because that's right from the book that I got in 2022. I missed last year's meeting. So with that in mind, this big city spending thing, and we're losing money on the average of $375,000 a year for our stabilization funds. I think he said at the end of 2023, we had $80,000 in the stabilization fund. That's from the book, I believe, John. All right? Let me finish. Then please explain, cover. So spending $5 million, $6 million from cash or money that could be used somewhat to our stabilization funds for emergencies in the future, instead of spending it on building that isn't absolutely necessary. It's not a desperation thing. Though to me, when people have to pick from this fund and this fund and this fund and this fund and this fund, it tells me they're desperate. Because we don't have the money here. We have to get it from over here. How about we'll stop that funding over there for that capital, say we'll take that money from there. It just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't smell right. But the point I'm making is that over the last 8 years, John was saying, we're losing $375,000 a year in the stabilization funds. And this $5-6 million, that's going to screw us up, won't it? John, if you could help out on that, I'd appreciate it. And be kind.
So I could help out on that. First of all, we have 3 different stabilization funds. I'm just remarkable people tell you what's in all the funds. I don't think any of them have 80,000.
Not off the top of my head, sorry, John.
But the thing I wanted to say is this. Each year when I speak in terms of Granby has to be careful about what it wants to do, because it's got a certain limited amount of money, and we're actually going to lower that limited amount of money each year. And at some point, we reach a point where absolutely things are going to break. So we've got to have this balance between what we want for services in town and what we want for other things in towns. But I think that one thing we ought to all keep in mind is the experience we've had thinking about schools for the last, I don't know how many years. And what's our first complaint? We haven't kept the schools up. So that just the fact that we have a building doesn't mean that it's the way it should be. It means that it's something there that you've got to think about continually being able to keep up to speed for what all the current circumstances are. We don't have a central place for the town offices. They're spread out. And you look around at any town around and you ask, what are the towns are like that? Can anybody name any where you have to go to multiple different locations in order to find out what's going on in town and get your work done? You know, we've been talking about a central location for the town offices ever since we had a committee that looked at building a new building. I think it was on the spot of the old, next to where the police department is, Aldridge Hall. And for one reason or another, I think you all remember the story about that. We had passed on that one. And so now, however many years later it is, the situation is we're spread out all over the place. There's little bitty offices here, little bitty offices there. Plus we have maintenance and all those places to do. So I would never say that we can't be doing buildings or we can't be doing services. It's just that you have to make sure that when you look at the long-term picture about it, that you can have some balance. The fact that there is $5 million in other funds, including the ARPA funds, which is a big chunk of that, means that if you took all that money back and put it in the stabilization fund, which is essentially what you'd be doing if you weren't spending on the project, then you'd have a big pile of money in the stabilization fund. You still have the same questions though, what do we spend money on? And I think that the idea of having a centrally located town office, which doesn't look like it's cost us any money out of current income, because it's not costing us any money out of current income. It's money that we thought we would spend in the past. So if we spend it, we haven't changed the situation at all, except that we once more have to look forward to being able to keep the balance between what our income is and what our outgo is. But on balance, the Finance Committee decided that it thought that this was a good project. Well, there are a couple of provisos I'd like to talk about. So we don't have any problem at all with spending this money, which is tucked away in unspent funds from past projects we've built to do it on the office, because of the benefits to the town. We went, what, 50, 60 years with West Street School, and it finally just became untenable. Well, every building that we have is going to be like that unless we keep the buildings up. And we have a commitment to keep up the buildings. We also have a commitment to the people of town. It should be easy to do business with the town. It should be easy to find out where people are. It should be easy to find out what's happening. And I'm not sure that it is the case right now. So I think this will go a long way towards helping. The proviso I want to talk about, I hope somebody on the committee would talk about the oil tank on the ground and what the possible problems are created by that, and what we're going to do if we find out some things don't work right. Thank you.
Regarding the audit tank, okay? When I met with the finance committee, I had explained that is a concern of the committee also. We know, we had put, like I said, back in 2013, we had voted to pull that tank and replace it. That was never done.
Why not? Well, I don't know.
That was a school project. I can't answer that question. Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you, I can't answer that question. It was given to the school for them to go through, get prices, and replace it. Never occurred, all right? The concern that we have, we know it's a single wall tank. We don't know if it has leaked or anything of that nature, okay? That's the first thing that we have to address before we even go forward with that building, is to call in a firm to do test borings, to turn around and determine, has it leaked into the soil? Okay? That's where we're at with that right now. We can't do it because we have no money at this point in time. The issue that we're gonna run into is, we believe that due to the age of the tank, and due to the fact that it is a single wall tank, DEP will require us to remove it. We believe that that's what's gonna happen. Because I believe it's been a while since I think it was mandated that all single wall tanks had to be removed from the ground. We didn't do that. So basically, we're in non-compliance with an edict from the state. To remove it, I actually, Selectman Bolio came to my office today and was talking about it. And he knows of someone who could come in and help us with that. He had his career in environmental science. He knows the rules and regs, and he'd be willing to come and talk to the committee to give us our options to do this. And as I said, I would not move forward with the project until we know what's going on with the tank.
Go ahead, sir.
How large is this tank you're talking about?
We believe it's a 10,000 gallon tank.
Okay, so the next question is, what do you plan on heating the place with after that?
We are planning on moving to a propane fired mini split system.
To take care of 44,000
Yes,
square feet.
yes.
So someone said back there that there's a possibility that maybe someone else would buy the property and use it for something, and they said we couldn't get enough for it. So apparently it's not worth anything if they can't get enough for it.
No, we had an appraisal done back in 2018, and it said that the most you could get for it in its condition was $100,000.
So you think that's a lot of money?
No,
It's
no,
not.
I never said that was a lot of money.
I know, but so obviously the building isn't worth much, if that's all it's worth.
That's to try and sell it on the public market.
I know, but wouldn't you get more for it? If it was worth something, if it was well maintained?
Not necessarily.
So why would
You figure that building
Why
is
would we
not.
fix it?
that
There's a
building-
hazmat cost for the next owner of the building. I think that's what the 2018 report was saying, is that it might be cheap to buy, but you've got to remediate everything.
Sure, but we have to do that too. Every window, you drive by there, and every one of those aluminum windows that's beat to crap. It's like gotta be leaking like crazy. You have to fix everything in that structure. There's nothing that you can use except for maybe a couple of walls.
No, it has not been leaking. because
That looks pretty bad.
That's
Been doing it
fine.
for 20 years.
That's okay. You're entitled to your opinion. I'm not gonna argue with you.
But
But the
you're
issue
gonna
is-
You're gonna find expenses down the road that you never can't plan on. You can't plan on it. You try to
the
do
price of
renovation
one-
on your own house.
Excuse me, sir.
Try to do a renovation on your own house.
Excuse me. Can I answer?
Sure.
We had Lazat Glass come to the building and look at all the windows and doors. That 1.7 million is to completely replace all the windows and doors. Okay? So we are remediating at a price of 1.7 million. We're getting rid of the PCBs, we're getting rid of the lead paint, and we're bringing in brand new windows. And I would let the chief talk, because he walked around with the gentleman, and the gentleman said that building is in great condition to be able to go through with the window project. And that's all I'm gonna say.
I'm only saying one more thing myself. You know, if you try to renovate your house or do anything like that, there's always unexpected things that you can never count on. How are you supposed to know when something comes up that you didn't plan on? You don't know everything that's gonna happen.
We have $1 million sitting there for the
That's
things
not
that
a
we're
lot,
not sure.
that's $1 million is not a lot of money.
We don't know that at this point in time.
Jeez. Guys,
With the baseball hat on, sir.
I just have, that's a two-part question. You presented a very tight presentation, very understandable of how the committee came to be. But I have a question on, were these positions appointed, were they elected? And Granby's got a wide demographic. I don't see any senior citizens on the committee, and it's dealing with the COA as well as the offices for the town.
The select board, I believe, did the select board ask for people who wanted to be on the committee?
I believe they did.
Back in, I don't know, sometime between August and January, when they appoint, it's an appointed committee. So the select board did, at one of their meetings, say that this committee was open, if you're interested, to volunteer to be on it.
Thank you.
Would you all please, when you're talking to them, we cannot hear you in the back.
There's more seats up front.
If you would, I'm just very happy with my seat. I don't think I need to run to the front to be heard. So if you could just stand and kind of let it, and speak up. If you can hear me, and I'm in the back, isn't it nice if I could hear you, if you would just vocalize a little bit louder and let your feelings be known. I would like to ask a question as long as I'm speaking. Do we have a schematic drawing anywhere of the layout and all the rooms, the interior of the school, and what areas of the interior would be assigned to the different offices? As you're talking about Council on Aging offices, what area would that be assigned to? So it would have been nice to have a schematic drawing on site so that we could see what you're talking about and where things are going. And all this 444,000 square feet that you have, where is it?
44,000.
Thank you. And my name, by the way, is Gloria Vivier, and I live at 31 North Street in Granby. And I've been living in town for over 40 years. So I think I have the right to be able to be heard. Thank you.
So Gloria, we don't have a schematic. That would be the next step once the town decides to go forward, and we have money to do that. So there is no schematic yet of where people would go. I mean, we can guess that we know that the first grade and kindergarten wing is large enough for all the town offices. We know that the, is it the 1951 edition, across from the cafeteria is large enough for the Council of Aging. So, but none of that is set in stone yet. That is just, we just know the building has enough space. Lisa.
Thank you. Lisa Petrelli, 6 Common Street. Will the entire 44,000 square feet have windows and clearly abatement, lead and asbestos, even though the 28,000 will be for phase 2 or phase 3, but all windows will be made kind of tight and energy efficient?
Yes, so from day one.
And then the second question.
And the sprinkler fire suppression system, the
Yes,
whole
that's
building
got
will also be done.
Second
Can
question.
you hear me, Gloria?
Oh.
Oh. So I said, you heard me, you couldn't. All the windows and doors in the complete 44,000 square feet will be replaced,
Fire suppression.
and as well as the fire suppression system.
Second question would be,
You can stand up when it comes back.
Yes.
Terry. Terry?
We talked about there's gonna be more than ample space at that west building, West Street's building. Do we know, and it was talked about selling this building, nothing was mentioned about Carnegie Library. Do we have plans for that, saying that's not needed anymore? And do we have a value of what this could be sold for currently?
So that was outside the scope of the committee's charge. I don't know if we have, if anybody sitting at the table has those numbers, but.
It was in the 2018 report, but clearly the market's changed, so it said 400,000 to 500,000 then. I remember the second part.
Go ahead. But stand up so Gloria can hear you.
In the 2018 study, Lloyd Brown Architects also provided some preliminary drawings for the partial renovation option for town offices and COA. Would the current committee consider looking at those, once you, if you get your appropriation, to not reinvent the wheel, that maybe some of the work is already done in those schematics for the preliminary on the town offices and the senior center?
I think so.
We're open, we're not like closed, like it's gotta be this way, we're open to, we're your committee here
Yeah, because I
to
don't know
figure this out for you
if that
guys.
schematic is, those schematics, because I don't have access to them, I just have excerpts of that report, whether those are coinciding with your thoughts about the 1951 wing for the COA, and then the first and second grade area for the town offices.
Oh, okay, you first and then,
So
oh,
if you have a situation where you can move everything there, how many places are we going to have vacant?
Well, first, I think everybody's been discussing this building. This building we'll try to clear out and sell. We've been renting the old phone company for the last 10, 15 years, roughly, to the tune of $25,000 a year. Our understanding is the owner is looking to get rid of it, sell it, doesn't want to be a landlord any longer. So the option would be possibly to talk to them about buying it, but again, it's another building we're maintaining, and right now we're maintaining property that we don't own.
So I was wondering.
Yeah,
If
no,
you move these things and you're talking about all this,
yeah, absolutely. That's part of what everybody's thinking about, is just trying to get everybody condensed into one building, less grounds to take care of. One-stop shopping. I'll tell you, as a chief of police, we have people come in on a regular basis asking for town hall. And sometimes people just look at you, you're like, well, what are you looking to do? And you can, sometimes people are looking at you like, well, none of your damn business. And it's like, well, then you can start at 215 West State Street. If you don't like what's going on there, go down to 10B West State Street, and I hope you find what you need. But yeah, it's aggravating for people. I understand that. You can see them just kind of throw their hands up in the air when they're like, what do we need,
one thing I say is you watch any renovation thing on TV, and every time they walk into it thinking, okay, this is what's gonna be. Next thing you know, this happens, that happens, oh, we didn't plan on this, we didn't plan on that, and you gotta expect that to happen.
I think we all expect that to happen to some extent. Again, we weren't charged, we weren't given any money to do any of these studies or anything else. We tried to use an old study and try to look at the feasibility. And again, I looked at it, part of it, they were trying to build two small buildings that probably were just about the size of what they need at that point to avoid a sprinkler system.
So where would they put those two buildings?
They're not gonna, no. That's what, they're gonna knock
So I
the,
understand that. If they knock that one down and put two buildings, why would they need to put two buildings? Why can't you just build another one like that?
because they were trying, back in 2018, they were trying to avoid hitting a code for sprinkler systems. Which was, we just got a price for West Street School of $500,000. I don't know what the number was back then, but that's a pretty solid price. The gentleman walked through the whole building with us.
Mr. Sereni?
Thank you so much.
I just wanted to bring up what the chief was talking about. The current annex building that you're leasing, what's the time frame on them wanting to sell that building? What's the contingency if they do sell it? Where are those buildings going to go?
I'll keep going. We have 18 months. The lease is up in June of 2025. So we have 18 months, and at that point, what this is kind of what our contingency is. If this doesn't go through, we're gonna have to try to come up with another plan. Possibly try to move all those offices at the annex into Carnegie Hall. That's the only other building the town owns. So, right, it's a small
He said
building.
that out loud.
And, you know, the other thing with the annex too is, I don't know how many people go pay their taxes and stuff, but pulling out of there, you take your life in your hands, you look twice, close your eyes and go, right? You know, I mean, that's a crazy driveway. So it's just another issue.
Mr. Holt?
Dennis Holt, 239 Tiffany Street, retired fire chief. I'd like to go back to the single wall tank. We need to do that one way or another. There have been cases that the buildings have been sold and they have gone back at the original owner because they violated the law that says all single wall tanks must be removed. I forget what year it is, but we need to do that. And that's something the Board of Selectmen needs to act on pretty soon. Because we had an incident at Aldridge. Remember, Chris? When these tanks leak, you just open your wallet and DEP will tell you when you can close it. We have an incident in town, in Mr. Sereni's neighborhood, that they raised a complete brick house, dug out the whole yard, and they're still doing it, and that was back in, around 1992. They still go in on a yearly basis, they have test holes, and they pump steam in to make sure everything is fine. They replaced a half a dozen wells. So this is serious stuff. This is not, we're gonna be liable one way or another. So this item on here should really go back to the Board of Selectmen and get it done ASAP. My next point would be, I see 1.75 on windows and doors. I drove by there tonight, earlier, just going down West Street. You have about 125 feet of glass. I really think all the windows in that whole complex needs to be downsized. We don't need offices with a whole wall of glass. Two, they're not efficient. Another incident is you can't use the wall space. You can only use the wall space so high. Windows need to be condensed.
That price, Jim Tromke and I walked through, like we said, with Lazat glass, and they have these panels that they can put in place of windows, but the price difference was minimal, so that's why he just gave us a price. So that price, we would have to figure out what offices for glass, what offices for panels. It was just getting us a number. We have no intention of putting all that glass back in that building.
Okay, it doesn't make sense.
No, absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely, but that was just to get a price. We're just
no,
trying
that's,
to, yep.
That's all well and good. I just think, you know, if we're gonna go forward, we need to set up a committee, go through all the things. And I'm looking at, we got 28,000 square feet left, according to what Ms. Mercier said. That's a big building. That's a lot of extra space. I think we should rip out the old auditorium area, create two little sections. And another thing, the fire suppression, it goes by square footage and type of use, and it goes under the building code, not the fire code. So that is a building inspector question that needs to be addressed. If you divide that building, you might get away with no fire suppression. One of the issues with fire suppression is we don't have water. So we gotta have storage tanks.
Right, that was all part of that, part of that
Right, but
500,000.
that's what I'm saying is, if we're creative on how we develop this land, if we go forward, I really think there's ways of doing it that somebody mentioned we're doing heat pumps or something. Have two systems, one for one wing, one for the other wing, and it separates the two structures, and we should look into it.
Okay, Mr. Hool, in regards to the fire suppression system, Chief O'Neill has already said that's a no-go. We will be required no matter the size of the building. He will not waive that.
He doesn't have to find it to stay on that. That
The
is a
state does.
building code.
We looked into it and it was the state of the fire marshal.
State of the fire marshal already advised us of this situation.
Yes, so that was something that we did look at,
Okay.
because we were trying not to have the cost of a fire suppression system. Could we get rid of it if we had specific doors or, no, Chief O'Neill said he was not going to waive that requirement, unfortunately.
There's a lady way in the back, yeah, go ahead.
Hi. I was wondering, this gentleman, are you Chris, the white shirt? You said that the West Street building is in good condition. Several years ago, we were told that that building was not in good condition and it wasn't worth renovating. What changed?
Type of use.
Okay, so this is a DESI issue, actually. The school, the bones of the school were in good condition. The classroom sizes were no longer to DESI specifications. So
Tell them what this is.
DESI is the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So they're the ones that guide all of our educational buildings, requirements, things like that. As time has gone on, they've required certain space issues. You're required to have certain equipment in rooms, and the building could not accommodate that. There was mildew issues. Lynn addressed that. There is still dampness that we've started to remediate by pulling some of those plantings out. But the building wasn't unsafe. It just was not up to DESI standards anymore, which is why they would not fund it if we tried to renovate it.
My next thought is about the oil. Now, can't we slow this down and figure out how much that's going to cost the town before we start spending? We all know it's going to be over $5 million. It's always higher than what the estimated cost is. There's always, oh, behind that wall, oh, behind that. And shouldn't we slow, this isn't a rich town. And as seniors, I don't know about anybody else in here, we can't afford to have our taxes raised. Well, you said that they would be raised, but common sense will tell you that that won't happen. And so I think that just figure out what that cost would be for the oil to clear the ground and if it did leak into it, and then take it from there.
We're gonna have to do the oil tank regardless if we go forward with it.
Right, right. But we won't $5 million.
Come on, Gail. The oil tank's gonna have to be addressed regardless whether we go forward with the building as town offices or if we demolish it. It's gonna be addressed either way.
How about the land, though? Just get rid of the building. What about the land itself? I mean, Granby's got good property value. So you get rid of the oil problem, the land itself to me would be worth more than $100,000.
Where your town office is gonna go?
I'm sorry, what?
Where are we gonna put the town offices?
They're right where they are for the time being.
They've been that way for how many years?
Mr. Randall.
George Randall, Taylor Street. A couple of things I'd like to address is about no elderly on the committee. I was asked to be on the committee, and I'm elderly, and I declined it. My 50 years of service to the town is sufficient to me at this time. However, the report that was done in 2018, I've read several times. And from the start to the finish, it was a negative report. And I thought to myself, there's not a damn thing in this report that's positive. And it just seemed, to me, it seemed like a very, very biased report that I walked through the school. Yeah, it needs a lot of work, but the bones are still there. As a taxpayer, I'm not prepared to give you a new building because we don't take care of our buildings. I am prepared to cough up the money that needs to be to renovate this old building. and buy the town whatever time it needs to look at your master plan, and if it's in the master plan, to come up with significant infrastructure repairs or maintenance. Regarding the oil tank, and if it was up to the school committee to see that the oil tank was removed, shame on the school committee for that, and I hope that they haven't cost the town millions of dollars. Chief Poole is absolutely correct. As an insurance adjuster, I've handled many environmental claims that have dealt with leaky oil tanks, and millions of dollars to remediate. I hope that's not the case. But is it safe to assume that the school committee still has that money set aside for that tank removal? Maybe I didn't read the report right.
George?
Yes, sir.
Yes, that is one of the articles we're using towards this project,
Thank you.
knowing that we had to address the oil tank issue. Now, when I met with the finance committee and we talked about it, both the finance committee and myself agreed the oil tank is a town issue, not this project's issue.
Right.
No matter what, it's a town issue. So we're
Exactly.
trying to address two projects in one project.
Gotcha.
Okay? And I told the finance committee, if you watched the meeting, I said, before we did any work in the building, the tank would have to be addressed first. Okay? Because if we find out that there's leakage and there's contamination of the soils, we know that $116,000 is not going to cover it. You're talking up to $1 million, depending upon
Easily.
what's going on.
Easily,
And
even more.
if surrounding wells are contaminated by it. Okay, we do know that, and that's our concern. That's why we're saying, look at it first, find out if we can continue, or do we have to go back to town meeting and say, DEP says we have to do this, and this. As Dennis says, what, 1992? It's been going on for one property. It could be the same for us. A 20 or 30-year issue, very easy.
Mr. Petras?
Water over the dam now. Western School was turned over to the town in 2018. So why hasn't the oil tank been fixed in 2018? Regardless of the school, the town's had it for 5+ years. Why hasn't that been fixed? The money's there. Why wasn't that done?
Can't answer.
Can't answer.
Can't answer this. That would be a select board question.
Rich? And then.
Okay, everybody in this room is saying the oil tank should be checked now. Why isn't it done? What's the problem? I was told at a select board meeting, or I heard, that if that tank is leaking, this project is dead. Okay, so why go ahead and do all this if you don't know about the oil tank yet? Get the oil tank checked, do the borings, pay for it, so we know what's going on, one way or the other.
Pardon? We might not have the money to go forward if they go.
Where's their time?
We might have a vote on December 11th. That's right.
We have ARPA funds, you can pay for it.
No money for it.
Right.
Sorry, we can't hear you when everybody's talking. So if you raise your hand, we will point to you. Sometimes we can't see in the back. So if you could stand and then we'll point to you so we know who we're addressing.
But this woman in front, we said first, and then we'll get to the back again.
I'm that woman.
You're that woman.
In this renovation, are all the rooms gonna stay the same size, or are you gonna take walls down to make bigger rooms?
It's a soft renovation, so we're not knocking walls down.
Okay.
Rooms stay the same. Glenn, did you have something to say before we call people in the back?
I do, I would ask, Chris, could you speak to the ARPA funds and how that affects the town and how, if the money's not used, where it goes as well? It's not just money that the town can keep and put in our general fund.
Well, the ARPA funds ARPA, for people who don't know, is the American Recovery Plan Act. That was passed by the federal government to try and kickstart the economy after COVID. The issue is we automatically got $1.8 million, almost $1.9 million. That money can be spent for any municipal project that we so desire. The issue that we're hearing now is that if people haven't spent the money, the federal government's talking about taking it away, taking it back from us. And that's been out there quite a bit in the news. So the issue becomes is this town has to decide what we're going to do. At one point, we were looking at using it towards the water main project, going down 202. That project is no longer a viable project. We don't have any other large-scale projects that we were looking at for the town. So that's why we were talking about using the ARPA funds for this project. And I believe there's also another deadline date, I think it's June 30th of 2025, that you have to spend this money by, or lose it. So that's why we're going down this road and trying to program these funds to this project.
Is there anybody in the back that wants to speak before we get repeat speakers?
I just want to know, the oil tank, what about air conditioning? You'd have to install air conditioning in that school because it doesn't have it. It wasn't built with air.
That was part of the mini split system that Mr. Martin was talking about. That's heating and air conditioning.
Thank you.
Yep.
So we've heard a lot of good questions tonight that we've pretty much thought about everything that's come up. Chris has a plan, we all have a plan that we're going to do it in steps. We have to get the money up front to know that we can move forward. The step is to understand what the issues are with the oil tank. At that point, we'll move forward with an architect and a project manager and nail down costs. We've got contingency in this plan to hopefully cover anything that's unforeseen. This project isn't a want, it's a need. We need to get all our town offices together. We bounce all over the place. We're paying for insurance on a vacant building. We're paying for insurance on this, and paying for insurance up on the annex building. There's gonna be savings to move forward with this project if we can get everybody into the school. The maintenance costs for all three buildings, and we're paying more for insurance for that school than we should be because it's vacant. And as far as maintaining buildings, I come from a background, John's well aware of it. There's never enough money for the private citizen or a corporation to be putting into buildings as much as you'd like to. When I walked into that building for the first time, I was pleasantly surprised how well it's been maintained. I think our town is doing a pretty good job with the funds they have to maintain the buildings that we currently have. That school's in pretty good shape. It's solid. We're going to do a soft renovation. When I first walked into it, I told the committee, I said, we could move into it as is. And we're that close. The abatement's going to happen. The abatement's going to happen. But we're going to do this all in steps to move ourselves forward. We're not just going to start putting windows in before the oil tank gets checked. We got a pretty good committee up here, and I think you ought to have a little faith in them that they're representing the town. Go ahead.
Before you two speak, there's a man in the back that hasn't spoken yet. Let him speak first, and then.
Well, I have a lot to say, but I'm not going to get it all right now. But I'm confused when everyone says it's a good building and it's worth $100,000. Have you considered maybe getting another appraisal or a second opinion or a third opinion? And the old appraisal is 5 years old, and that's a consideration. And secondly, I'd like to say is that this is so premature if the oil tank hasn't been addressed. And then thirdly, on top of that, if it's such an issue, why hasn't it been addressed? I mean, we can always look back and say, well, geez, it's someone else's fault, but it's been, what, 5 years? And now we're rushing to do this huge project? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, I'm not sure how we can, as a town, say, yeah, we're comfortable doing this based on the activities that's occurred. I'm not for or against it at this point, but another thing that should have been addressed is, you know, the $1.8 million is almost technically free money. It's not coming from the taxpayers, correct? So that's a good thing. And the second thing too that should have been mentioned is that if we're consolidating all these buildings into one, and we're able to sell these other buildings, isn't that another benefit that you could have said, well, these buildings are worth X amount, so that's coming off of the total line too. So I mean, that would be for the project. But again, it's been vaguely addressed on what buildings are going to be available for sale. This is one of them. What are the other ones? What other ones are going to be combined into that one building? Anyone?
Well,
How many?
Well, obviously, you've talked about this building.
Yep.
We don't own the annex. We
Well, I
rent
don't know the
that.
annexes, I'm sorry, I've only lived here 5 years.
Okay, well, the annex is up on, it's the old,
Yes.
215 West State Street. We don't own it. We've been renting it for the last 10 or 15 years,
Okay.
but maintaining it as part of the agreement. So we can't do anything with that, we're just gonna leave it,
Right.
because she's gonna sell it anyway.
Yeah.
And then the only other building we have is the old library, which is Carnegie Hall, where they do some of the, right at the point.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
That we could do, we could try to sell it. I think it's something the town would have to figure out what they wanna do with.
Well,
But-
this is an asset historical.
Right, again, and maybe it has that, again, that,
So
so the only building,
asset is here?
right now, this is the main asset, correct?
John?
I'd like to talk a little bit about the timing of this, building on some of the conversation that's been here. Certainly, it would be possible to break this into 4 or 5 separate projects and say, okay, we do this project first, and then we see what happens, and we move on to the next project, and the next project. The whole project becomes 5 or 6 different things. But what I would suggest is that this 18-month, when you have to do something about the annex, should be something people are concerned about. And the reason is that we're going to have to do something. Something in terms of office space for a lot of people. And so you ask, what are the risks? Well, I don't see very many, because if we vote for the money for this project to redo the Westwood School, it's going to be done in pieces, like some other projects, all are done in pieces. The first piece is going to be a determination of what's going on with the tank. And whatever is going on with the tank, that's the thing that's going to be done first. That has to be done. There's just no question about it. That's got to be done. Either it's a problem right now, or else it's a disaster waiting to happen, so it's got to be the first thing addressed. Right now, there's no money to do that, if there's something wrong with the tank. One advantage of having this project approved just as it is now is that we'll have in one spot $5 million, which we now have spread out over a lot of little pieces, it's big pieces. And so moving forward, whether this particular project goes on or not, first of all, the oil tank thing is going to be taken care of. Second of all, for future uses, if we need more money to do the project can't happen. There's only so much money in this. So all things will come to a halt while the town decides on what the next steps are. So we'd be no worse off than we are now, except we have the advantage that we've got all this money in one place to be able to think about what we're going to do next. So from the Finance Committee point of view, we just see that there are a lot of benefits to approving this project right now, as long as what we're doing is agreeing that the first thing that's going to happen is a determination of what the situation is with the oil tank. And then that gets solved first, and then we decide whether or not there's enough money to do the rest of the project. If there's not enough money, then it'll be like having leftover money, just we have leftover now. Some projects are not done all the way, so they're stopped, and there's piles of money in these articles. That's what's going to happen here. This money is all going to be in one spot, identified, and we're just going to move on. What we've gained, though, is we've gained the time. And the time might be very, very important when you're thinking about 18 months ahead. Building project. If anybody's involved with any other large building projects, you may be aware of what has happened with really a lack of labor to do some things. So I would suggest that we do this, get this thing started as soon as possible, because I don't think we can afford to wait 5 months before we say, okay, now we can start the project. Thank you.
Lisa?
So, The way the warrant is worded, I was told, is fairly standard language, but part of it, I believe, says to vote to appropriate or authorize bonding. So if the project, say it was open heart surgery on your husband, and the doctor gets in there, and it's more complicated than you had money for, and he comes out and he says to you, was he a good husband or a bad husband? And if he's a good husband, you'll give more money, maybe at an override vote in the future. So I don't necessarily agree that if it started and we ran out of money, we couldn't do the project. We might be asked to eventually turn up for an override vote to finish a project. Who wants a hole in the ground or half of renovation done? So I do believe in the warrant, we're left open to that, but you have to take calculated risks, and if all goes well, and the tank is an easy pullout, then it's 5.68 million. The contingency is tiny, it's 123,000. The miscellaneous is the million.
Right.
So,
Right.
the other point I'd like to make is, Chris, you said at the November 9th Finance Committee meeting that you did not, with respect to the oil tank, want Mass DEP involved because they'd be breathing down our necks. I'm in a butter. I want to make sure that tank is really
He's not
handled
gonna have
properly.
any choice.
The issue is to notify them immediately. Because then that, yes, they would immediately require us to probably remove that. And at this point in time, we don't have any other way of heating the building except for the oil in that tank. So we would have to try and go and get some kind of tank to be able to put oil in, to be able to continue heating that building.
Above ground?
I don't know what the regulations are for above ground. I think it still has to be on a cement pad, it still has to have, I'm just saying.
Yeah, I mean, would that be something to look into?
Or do we just go and get a bunch of 275 gallon tanks and link them together, you know? It's those type of things that, yes, we would have to consider at that point. Because right now, we do have record storage in there, we do have the pipes that are in there, okay, so they would end up freezing, the bathroom pipes would freeze, you know, there's just so much in there that we would have to continue keeping it heated, okay? And that is a concern, all right? We just don't know where to go with this at this point, okay? This committee is just following its directive of looking at how to address that building, okay? As we keep going on, and as I said, Selectman Boyo mentioned a gentleman who could probably come in and give us advise us. Yeah, I want to meet with that gentleman, and I want him to tell me what we can and can't do, okay? Before we start notifying DEP, hey, we have another issue here.
Would that be another expense? Consulting expense? Or?
No, he'd be willing to come in for free to talk to us.
So before, this woman in the blue jacket, before I let you speak, I think that Mr. Trump, you wanted to say something in response, Lisa?
Yeah, one thing that we haven't discussed is that we think there's probably some grant money available out there. We can't apply for it, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, we can't apply for it until money's been appropriated for the project, but there's some energy grants available for like the windows. So we talk about contingency and unforeseen obstacles, but we don't know what other funds are going to be available to us as we kick this project off.
Well, the miscellaneous, 1 million, I mean, that's 20%, that's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
I think.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I'm a little confused, and maybe I'm mistaken, but I thought Mr. Martin indicated that the school committee or the school department had money specifically earmarked for that tank?
Yes.
How much was it?
120.
It was originally 120,000. There's 113,000 left in there. So they started to do something with it, but I'd have to go back and research what the money was spent.
Okay, but you do have some money to start that,
Yeah.
but you don't know if you need more in order to mitigate anything that you may.
Because the minute DEP says it has to be removed, we have to remove it. Okay? And I don't have enough funds if they're telling me to take it out and to remediate any contamination that is there.
Well, can't we get started with what you have, at least? And then if you need more, come back to the town for more money. I don't understand why you can't get started.
And I said, I want to meet with the gentleman that
That's
Mr.
fine.
Bolio had talked about, to
That's
have
fine.
him come in. The minute the DEP knows this, they are gonna dictate to us.
Yeah, but
You
you
know,
also said it should have been done a long time ago.
Yes, it should have been done a long time ago. I'm not arguing that
Let's get
point.
it done.
Are you gonna wait till the December 11th outcome before you speak to this
No.
gentleman who you?
No.
Okay.
If the guy can come in tomorrow or next week or whatever, I'll talk to him. We'll schedule a meeting to talk to him.
Mrs.
But
Sereni?
that's not an issue for this committee.
Right, correct.
That's
Correct.
the selectmen's problem, correct?
It's a town problem.
Well, it's a town problem, but it's not this committee's problem.
As part of the project, we included it to address it,
Right.
but it really is a select board.
Right, okay.
Mrs. Sereni?
The money that was appropriated to the school department for the oil tank, is that still under control of the school department? Or is it back with the selectmen?
It is, the school had abandoned that building when they moved out and turned it back to the town. So now, it should be the town who spends those
You
funds.
don't have to have approval from the school.
No,
No.
general funds.
No.
Mr. Hool?
I'd like to make a suggestion, and I don't know if we can do it at this time. Apparently, the big issue is the oil tank, okay? That can be removed really reasonably fast. Can you adjust the warrant article of this coming meeting to allocate up to $1 million for the removal of that tank and come back maybe in February or whatever for the balance? Because I think everyone feels unsafe on that tank. If we could do that, maybe postpone the meeting and do it January 1st or 2nd or 3rd, whatever, with a new warrant article just to cover that tank. And as far as removing the tank and having other tanks, yeah, you can put a couple 250-gallon tanks, have to be contained, no big deal.
But what I'm saying, we could find a way of storing enough oil to keep the
Right.
furnaces running.
Right.
My concern is, Dennis, when we start moving and scheduling meetings around the holidays,
Yeah,
we're accused of trying to sway how the town meeting's gonna go. Because people go away for the holidays. People have other things they're doing. There's vacations, there's this, there's that. That's why we picked December 11th. It's far enough after Thanksgiving, far enough before Christmas. Okay, that, this is why we went with that date, to try and get this through. We got to 5.6 million at this December 11th meeting. If it's gonna take $1 million as part of this project to take care of that tank, then we're gonna have to spend that. And we won't have enough money then to do the other work in the building. Okay? We just broke everything out for you as to what we had definite numbers for, and then we put that miscellaneous for things we didn't have hard quotes for. This is what we're trying to do. If the tank ends up running more than 113,000 and ends up running $1 million, we're gonna have to spend it, because like you know, DEP is gonna dictate what we have to do. And there's no way we can turn around and say we're not gonna do it at that point.
Glenn, do you have a response?
Well, I want to ask Chris, regards to the ARPA funds, does that be appropriated by the town at a town meeting, those funds?
Yes.
So that whole portion has to be, it can't be just spent outside?
Correct.
Mr. John?
Play some what ifs. If that meeting on December 11th, we allocate the $5 million. Then you ask, okay, what happens when the oil tank is checked and it finds out that there's no leakage, everything's good, it can be taken out for $110,000 or $200,000. The money is there, the project is set to move forward, everything's okay. What happens if instead there's oil leakage and it's gonna cost $1 billion, $2 million to take out the tank and remediate? The money is allocated already because it's allocated as a project, it's part of the project. So we're all set that money is already there in order to do this. Then there's $3 million left. It's not enough to do the rest of the project. Mr. Tromke has already said we're not going to put in $1,700,000 worth of windows for a project that we know can't be finished. So then the town goes back and makes a decision on what it is that needs to be done from that point on. But the point is that the oil tank is taken care of, and that's the biggest problem that the hot town has right now. Now, on the other hand, suppose that we don't approve this project at $5 million. Suppose we only approve for what? I don't know what. $1 billion for the tank? If we have to do something for the tank, there's not enough money. If the tank needs anything special, there's not enough money there to do it. So at some point, we have to have a town meeting and allocate funds for the removal of the tank. Right now, we have no idea what it's going to cost. So then you'll be back saying, well, all right, and maybe it's going to cost $300,000. So we allocate $300,000. Turns out it's going to be $400,000. Then you're in another town meeting. And even if it's a small amount of money, $300,000 or $400,000, that wouldn't affect the overall project. You've put the project off 3-4 months, and you're running into this 18-month deadline, which is, it's a deadline. People, it's a deadline. So I don't see any risk at all to the town in allocating the money right now. It's going to take care of the tank no matter what. And if the tank comes in at a low cost, it's going to take care of the whole project. If the tank comes in at a higher project, if the tank comes in at a higher cost, the project is dead. The town has to go back and now refigure what it's going to do for all its office needs in 18 months.
But it also allows us to start applying for grants. Once the money's been appropriated for the full project, then we can start to do that.
Very good.
We wouldn't be able to do that prior to.
So anyway, that's how I think the finance committee would think about whether it should be allocated or whether it should go. And really the driver, I think, is this deadline of 18 months. It is not much for a big project.
Rich, do you have a question?
Ryan Hochschild, who was a member of the prior committee for the school, said he walked through there and I guess there were 1 or 2 additions to that school. He said there were 1 or 2 or 3 separate heating systems. Now, did you take that into account? Chris mentioned maybe using propane. Will there be 1 heating system for the entire building? There will be. Or will it stay the way it is? He said there are separate heating systems.
There'll be multiple heating systems included.
Would it be better if there was just 1?
No.
Pardon?
No.
He's a mood. Were you going to make
Again, once we get started, once the money is appropriated, our engineers will do a cost-benefit analysis to see whether one plant can heat the whole school or the split duct system.
Right, so something to look into.
Of course, of course. But typically, the system that Chris mentioned earlier is usually the most economical to operate and install. New technology.
Using propane now, propane is very expensive. Propane is more expensive than oil.
How about solar?
Per gallon.
Grant for solar?
Yeah, we've talked about that as well.
We all have future plans, but we can't move forward until we get this approved. That's the problem. Is I know you guys keep saying, you know, the town, we don't do anything or whatever, but we had a project done in 2018. It didn't get completed by whatever reason or whatnot, for whatever project or whatever. We want this to go forward for the future of this town to move forward, because also the longer we wait, the prices go up. So we said, well, we need it. So why are we delaying and detaining this when we get all our ducks in a row and then we'll move forward? We have that deadline and we are able to do this, and we do have which comes first, which comes second, and that's what predicts us how we go forward. We can't pass 1, we can't go to 2 until I finish 1. And this committee is aware of that, and the Board of Selectmen is also aware of this.
Oh, Glenn, and then in the green
I
hat.
just want to talk about the ARPA fund. Chris has mentioned, we can lose that. That's free money from the federal government that we get to use. So moving this plan forward, gives us the opportunity to start spending that money. So if the oil tank does run the extreme amount of money, we're paying for that, but that's money that was given to us from the federal government. At least we can use that to put towards that and pay for it. That's not funds that came from the town. So it's a benefit for us to move forward with it. It's taxpayers' money, but it's the federal government gave us the money. And I hate for the federal government to take it back and us not to use it. As Chris talked about, the government's talking about now, if cities and towns have not used their money, they're gonna take it back. And if you've been listening to the news, a lot of your cities and towns are spending that money for that reason. So I think it's a benefit to us to kind of move forward with the project so we have the ability to start using that money that was given to us by the federal government before it goes away.
I have a question about the ARPA funds. If they're allocated, they cannot take them back, so.
Yeah, they're committed funds.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure, so.
Yeah, as long as
we
they're
have
committed
them,
funds.
Even if they decided next June to take it back and we
Right.
were done with our project, we still retain those funds. Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
It seems to me that all discussion is moot until the oil tank is resolved. And I understand DEP's gonna get involved in the whole 9 yards. And there's deadlines and all that, but that needs to be resolved. You can't just keep on batting it back and forth. It needs to be dealt with.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann Munger from Smith Avenue, and I want to thank everybody on the committee for all of this very valuable information. And I do agree the town needs to move forward. And it seems to me at this point we're just rehashing the same things over and over, and that you have made it quite clear that the project is in steps, and the first step is the oil tank. So it seems like we're all agreed on that in this room. And again, I thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa?
Just a question to John. Thank you for doing those scenarios. The scenario that he describes for December 11th comes, we appropriate the 5.7 million. You start tackling the tank. It's costly. Say it's the 2 million he hypothesizes. Now you have 3.7 left. How does that affect the project? Can it go forward but with fewer windows? Does it not go forward? Does it go forward as conceived and you ask voters for overruns?
The first thing after the oil tank would be to get an OPM, or not even before the.
No, we would get a designer to come in and probably draw schematics, to be honest with you.
So if the designer knew we only had 3.7 million at that point,
They
we would design,
right?
well, we could design
Okay.
that 3.7
Okay,
million.
understood. Thank you.
Yes?
Yeah, a real easy question. How will you communicate to us the results of the oil test?
Select board meeting. That GCAM is there recording all those meetings. It's out on YouTube, it's out on, out there for people to download and look at. We will be addressing it with the board of selectmen as we find the results or as it goes along. And if DEP gets involved, there'll be letters that'll be sent to the board of selectmen telling us what to do. So.
Did you have a question?
I do. I'm Diane Morgan. I work for the Senior Center now. I'm the outreach person. 20 years ago, I worked at Aldrich Hall for the Senior Center. It was a horrible building. It was horribly inadequate. Then we moved down here. This building and this space that we occupy is horribly inadequate. There's no privacy. We actually have a foot nurse that comes in twice a month who cuts toenails in the pantry, in the food pantry, because there's no space. And I want to go on record with this. The other thing is that my fear about this project is, since there's no planning or anything for the space, is that we're going to get dumped down there in another very unsuitable space that's not going to be functional, and we're going to be in the same situation that we were in here and on Aldrich,
Well, when it comes to the next step, which would be the planning and the layout of the building and who goes where, all that input would be taken.
We were not even asked
Because we're not there yet.
I know, but we weren't ever asked about the space. And when we tried to do something about improving it to make it more suitable, we got nowhere. It's like, that's it, that's the way you work, that's it. Well, that's not it. Has any of you seen another senior center in another town?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're spectacular.
Yes,
Ours
right.
is woefully inadequate.
Because those towns went after it. They got grants and they did it properly. They didn't throw people into another space that,
But I
God
think
knows
it's
what.
sad that you think we throw you into another
You
space.
threw us in here.
Well, I mean, like, not this committee.
Yeah,
but- This committee's trying to improve the town.
Sorry.
And especially, well, not especially, but a
It's
COA is part
terribly
of this.
inadequate. It's an embarrassment.
I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but I'm saying this is a new chapter, right? And so we have to move forward somehow. And when that point comes,
The history hasn't been good.
well, new people.
That's right.
And Lynn, just to that point too, I think this gives us the opportunity to build something that is right for the seniors. And I would say too, as we move down the road, people can have input on how the building's gonna look and what it needs. That's when it gets to, but we're in the starting phase of that where money at least has to be appropriated so we can start doing something. If we don't appropriate the money, then we can't do anything. This is the beginning stage. As soon as we get that done, there's talk about the oil tank, we'll get that taken care of. And then we can start talking about designing the building the way so it fits our needs. What do we need for office space? What we need for a senior center? What people want. It's not gonna just be three people talking about this is what it's gonna be. We have to have input from the town talking about it, especially about the seniors. If we're gonna build a senior center, we want input from the seniors. What do they want? What do they need inside the building? Those are things that gotta come into play. That's when we come and talk about designing it. That's what all that's gonna be part of. We can't get the ball rolling until we appropriate the funds. So that's our first step, one way or another. That's the first step. That's what has to happen to get this car rolling down the road. Until we do that, we're not going anywhere.
Mr. Randall, do you have a question?
No, but I have a comment. The comment was made about how people were going to find out about this stuff. Come to the Board of Selectmen's meetings. Watch it on YouTube. Get involved. Holy crap. And I can assure you that if there is a problem, you are going to know about it. And it's going to be in every newspaper in the state of Massachusetts and Connecticut and Vermont. It's a little town that has a major oil problem. I can assure you that you're going to know.
So let's get the oil tank thing fixed.
Regarding the layout and design, how much square footage does the senior center have now, and then the office at the annex? Like, how much square footage are we utilizing now?
There's 2,700 here, it's just not configured well.
Okay,
And I put in a request for 7,700 from the new office.
okay.
And they should probably have more. Okay.
So, you
Figure
have
about
an
10,000 probably.
What was the
People started
question?
marking stuff out. So roughly, we back in 2018, they said the needs of the departments was about 11,000 square feet.
What's department?
All of them,
All of them.
including the COA.
Town, okay.
Correct.
So 7,000 roughly for senior center
No,
now?
I think it was 5,200 and 5,200, the way it was split out.
But I requested 7.0.
Okay.
Currently, yes, she has requested, yes.
But again,
Well, twice now.
but again, that involved the sprinkler system that they didn't want to get involved in, so sizing came into play.
Yeah, okay.
So, and now there's different town offices that exist, or departments that exist, that didn't exist back in 2018.
Okay.
So they need more room. So roughly right this minute, we think we need like 16, 17,000 square feet off the top of my head. So we have current needs. We have 44,000. We can
grow into that.
We can exactly
Okay.
for future use. Storage is crazy with records. I know at some.
Go digital?
Well, that's a huge expense that we have. Yep. So we'd have to look at that.
Okay.
Yep. We're probably gonna have to look at it at some point. We just had to destroy nearly 40 years of records for the police department due to them being stored in a secure vault at the old Kellogg Hall They got destroyed by water. They had black mold. I couldn't even, my guys, myself, one of my officers went upstairs. They restored it at the garage at the old Veterans, at the Veterans Memorial. And we were up there for 5 minutes. We had to get out of there. I had to have the fire department go with Scott Air Packs and take them out for me. And we had to burn them. So we have to have proper storage for these records. And yeah, digitizing, yeah, that's big, but it's a huge expense.
Yeah, I mean, you can go forward starting now.
Exactly.
You have to start sometime.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Part of the project.
Yeah. Are you a digitizer by chance? But yeah, we realize that, but again, that's why we're like, wow, 44,000 square feet for what we estimate from what we could deal with no real input from, we had people volunteer to come and give us prices. We could get 44,000 square feet for $5.6 million.
Yeah.
You know, we were talking 11,000 square feet for $7 to $8 million, you know, so not even big enough for what we want now. Or need now, yeah.
Yeah, our needs.
It's a need.
And we're not spending $100,000 or $200,000 on another study that gets flushed.
Yeah.
Mr.
Yeah,
Mayor?
you said you've only been here 5 years. We're the town of studies.
Go ahead.
I'm amused a little bit by having my comments about having a small town budget and a big town mentality. Of course, nobody has the room that they would all like to have. 7,500 feet, 10,000 feet, well, we don't have that kind of money, right? We didn't have the kind of money to build bigger schools than we built. We didn't have the kind of money to build a bigger library than we built. We didn't have the kind of money to build a bigger public safety complex than we built. But we did have a budget. We had an amount of money that the town agreed to spend and work within that. That's what has to happen. If you can get the town to vote for a $10 million project instead of a $5.6 million project, then fine. We'll have twice the space for everybody. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think the best that we can hope for is to say we've got this much money, we've made an agreement with the town, everybody gives up a little bit, let's live within that, get this thing done, and move on to the next generation. Thank you.
And with that, we've been here for an hour and a little more than an hour and a half, so I hope that you all have your questions answered and have more information, learned about this project now. Is there anybody that's dying to say something before we close it? Oh, Lisa, what a surprise.
So on December 11th at 7 p.m., East Meadow School, special town meeting to vote on this. What's required? Simple majority or 2/3?
So a majority is required to pass the 5.7 million on December 11th, 6 o'clock. Yep, 6? 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock. So thank you all for showing up. Hopefully it's helpful. Thank you.